chains of fire. The fall of Earth did not come with a single battle. It came with silence. The skies had burned with Dominion fire. Cities erased in moments, and the oceans boiled with falling wreckage. What was left of humanity's proud civilizations was scattered like ash in the wind. Survivors were herded onto colossal slave barges, packed into cells colder than death. For many, the stars were seen for the first time not as symbols of wonder, but as prison bars. The Dominion did not conquer through destruction alone. They conquered through despair. Entire species have been ground beneath their rule, their histories erased, their cultures shattered, their spirits broken. The karate miners, once a proud warrior race, now shuffled silently to their labor. The Valen artisans spoke only in whispers, their eyes hollow, their songs of creation long silenced. When humanity was delivered in chains to the labor camps of the Dominion, the overseers expected the same result. Another species broken, another voice silenced, another people erased. But humanity was not like the others. Even in the mines of Karath, where sulfur choked the air and heat blistered the skin, humans spoke in defiance. They whispered to one another of Earth, not as it was destroyed, but as it had lived. Stories of oceans and mountains, of music and laughter, of wars where humanity had stood against impossible odds. In the barracks of Ulthar, men and women traced crude maps of the stars on the floor, dreaming of ships they would one day steal. On the prison world of Vadrath, children born into chains played soldier with scraps of metal, their laughter echoing like the prophecy of a coming storm. The Dominion overseers watched with confusion. The humans should have broken. They should have bowed their heads and accepted their fate, as every other species had before them. Instead, they adapted. Instead, they learned. Instead, they waited. For every lash, there was quiet endurance. For every humiliation, a stubborn spark of pride. For every friend who died in the mines, 10 more swore revenge in the dark. The galaxy had seen humans only as prey. The Dominion had labeled us fragile, primitive, weak. Yet in their arrogance, they had overlooked the truth written in our history. Humanity had never been unbroken for long. Every age of chains, every invasion, every empire that had tried to crush us had only forged us harder. In the silence of the labor camps, something new was being born. Not surrender, not despair, but fire. And one day, that fire would burn across the stars. Sparks in the ashes. The Dominion believed humans would fade into the same silence that swallowed every conquered race before us. To them, the chains were permanent, the cycle inevitable, but they had never known a species that could take pain and turn it into fuel. It began in the sulfur mines of Thalcor. The miners worked in endless shifts, dragging carts of glowing ore beneath skies so toxic even Dominion soldiers wore breath-filtration masks. Overseers carried electro whips, ready to lash any slave who faltered. Humans, new to the Dominion yoke, pushed alongside Karate and Valen, who had long since given up hope. But one day, something changed. A group of humans, led by a gaunt prisoner named Rains, had stolen small blasting charges meant for tunneling. For weeks, they concealed the devices beneath loose rocks, passing them hand to hand in secret, while overseers mocked their exhaustion. The Karate watched with confusion. To them, rebellion was suicide. To the humans, it was a gamble worth taking. When the moment came, it was brutal and sudden. The tunnels shook as the explosives detonated, collapsing an entire section of the mine. Dominion guards rushed in, only to be ambushed in the dark by humans wielding sharpened tools and lengths of chain. The slaves, thought weak and broken, fought with the strength of desperation. Overseers were crushed beneath falling stone. Whips and rifles were torn from alien hands. The first rebellion in centuries had begun. News spread faster than the Dominion could suppress it. On the prison moon of Ulthar, 7, humans working in the assembly lines began sabotaging machines. Conveyor belts snapped, reactors overheated, and Dominion mechs walked off the lines with hidden flaws that made them explode hours into battle. Overseers executed dozens, but for every human who fell, 2 more took their place. And then came Vadrath. There, a transport ship bound for the inner Dominion worlds was seized mid-flight. Human prisoners overpowered their guards. cracked open the cockpit, and forced the ship into a suicide dive, straight into the prison governor's fortress. The explosion lit the night sky for hours. The Valen prisoners, who had once abandoned all thought of defiance, began chanting the humans' name in reverence. The Dominion dismissed these as isolated incidents. A few unruly slaves, easily corrected. But what they failed to see was that the galaxy itself was stirring. The enslaved races began to watch humanity closely. The karate miners, beaten into silence for generations, quietly passed humans weapons of sharpened ore. The insectoid Atari, whose hives had been shattered centuries ago, revealed caches of scavenged Dominion tech hidden deep within their warrens. Even the quiet, fragile Valen began to whisper in their strange, melodic language. Perhaps freedom is not impossible after all. For the first time in living memory, hope began to spread. And hope was more dangerous than any weapon. The Dominion still believed their empire unshakable. They still believed humans were nothing more than another broken species to be added to their dominion. But they were wrong. The sparks had been lit in the ashes of their tyranny. And sparks, if fed, become wildfires. The fire spreads. The Dominion's arrogance was legendary. But even they could not ignore the mounting tide of unrest. Slave uprisings, once rare and easily crushed, now erupted across entire sectors. And at the center of every report, one name appeared again and again. Humans. The Empire called us primitive. They said we lacked discipline, lacked intelligence for war among the stars. Yet every strike we launched told a different story. The first true battle of the uprising came on Karat Prime, where humans and their karate allies ambushed a Dominion supply convoy. The raiders were armed with little more than stolen rifles and mining equipment, but they had what the Dominion never expected: strategy. Rains, scarred from years in the mines, orchestrated the ambush with brutal precision. When the Dominion transports entered the canyon, explosives hidden in the cliffs collapsed the rock above. The armored escorts, hulking war machines that once terrified slaves, were funneled into narrow kill zones. Humans poured fire from the cliffs, while karate miners swarmed from below with crude melee weapons, ripping Dominion soldiers from their armor. It was not a battle. It was a massacre. When the smoke cleared, humans piloted the captured convoy ships into the night sky. For the first time, slaves had not just resisted, they had won. The news tore through the galaxy like wildfire. On the jungle world of Tierra, humans led insectoid Atari into their first battle in centuries. Using Dominion flamethrowers against their former masters, the Atari hissed in fury as they ripped soldiers apart with their claws. On Ulthar 7, prison foundries once dedicated to building Dominion war machines now forged weapons of rebellion. Crude, brutal things stamped with human hands. The Dominion retaliated with overwhelming force. Warships descended on rebellious planets, turning cities to ash and scattering survivors. But each attempt at suppression only fueled the flames. Humans fought differently than the Dominion was prepared for. They didn't march in neat formations or follow predictable patterns. They fought like predators, using ambushes, sabotage, and guerrilla tactics to bleed the Empire dry. On the frozen plains of Vadrath, Dominion tanks thundered across the snow, hunting rebels. But humans had already mined the ice fields, collapsing entire columns into freezing rivers. In the skies above, commandeered transport ships patched together with scavenged tech swooped down in daring raids, their human crews laughing as they evaded the Dominion's massive, lumbering cruisers. And for every human victory, more species joined. The karate miners became shock troops, their massive frames smashing through Dominion lines. The fragile Valen, thought broken forever, turned their artistry to war, creating sabotage devices so subtle they crippled entire Dominion fleets. The Atari swarmed in the jungles, overwhelming garrisons with sheer ferocity. What began as sparks had become a storm. The Dominion's fleets were still vast, their armies still numbered in the billions. But now, for the first time in millennia, they bled. Reports reached the throne world itself. Slaves no longer begged for mercy. They no longer obeyed. They no longer feared. And always, always, at the heart of every strike, there were humans, the last to fall under Dominion chains, the first to rise against them. The galaxy, long silent in despair, now roared in defiance. The war had begun, and the Dominion, once eternal, now faced its doom. The fall of chains. The Dominion had ruled for millennia. Its fleets were endless, its armies unmatched. It will carve into every enslaved world with fire and blood. But now, for the first time in living memory, the galaxy no longer whispered in fear. It shouted in rebellion. Across the stars, Dominion garrisons burned. Convoys vanished into ambushes. Fleets that once inspired are now limped home with scars and losses they could not explain. Their mistake was the same in every sector. They underestimated the slaves, and most of all, they underestimated humans. The uprising had grown beyond scattered revolts. It was a war now, one the Dominion could not stamp out fast enough. At its heart, humans led the charge, wielding not just weapons, but an idea more dangerous than any gun: freedom. The gathering storm. Rain stood at the helm of the Iron Dawn, a captured Dominion warship that now bore human scars across its armor. Around him, the command deck was filled with more than just humans. Karate warriors manned the gun stations, their massive hands surprisingly precise on Dominion controls. The insectoid Atari chittered over tactical readouts, mapping enemy patrol routes with a hive's efficiency. Even the fragile Valen, once thought too delicate for war, had repurposed Dominion tech into sabotage drones humming quietly in the corners. It was no longer just humanity's fight. It was everyone's. Their target. The Dominion fortress world of Zeroth Prime, a planet that had never fallen, never been challenged, never known defeat. From its shipyards poured the Empire's fleets, and from its throne, the High Regent directed the crushing of rebellions. If Zeroth fell, the galaxy would see what had once been unthinkable. The Dominion could bleed, and it could die. Rains turned to his crew. We're not just striking a fortress. We're striking the heart of the Empire. We end this, or we end with it. No one faltered. The first blow. The battle began with silence. Dozens of captured transports drifted into Zeroth's orbital lanes, their signatures masked to mimic Dominion supply ships. The fortress allowed them passage without question. Only when they were too close to intercept did their hulls split open, disgorging swarms of rebel fighters, cobbled together from scrap, stolen engines, and sheer desperation. The Dominion's orbital guns roared to life. Blue fire tore into the void, ripping apart half a dozen rebel ships instantly. But the rest pressed forward, weaving and darting with reckless maneuvers Dominion crews had never seen before. Where Dominion fleets moved like machines, humans and their allies fought like predators. Unpredictable, defiant, willing to risk everything. The sky above Zeroth became a storm. Captured cruisers rammed into Dominion battleships, tearing through armor before detonating their fusion cores. Karate boarding pods slammed into frigates, unleashing roaring warriors armed with stolen plasma axes. Atari swarms ripped open hulls, crawling through corridors in a tide of chittering blades. And behind it all, rains drove the Iron Dawn straight into the thickest fire. The ground awakens. While the skies raged, the ground war began. On Zeroth's surface, where sprawling cities had been built on the bones of conquered species, the slaves themselves rose. The humans had smuggled weapons to them for months, hidden in food shipments and medical crates. Now, with the fleet above distracting the fortress, the people of Zeroth struck. Factories that had once forged Dominion war machines exploded from within. Slave barracks erupted into riots. Alien workers who had once trudged in silence now hurled themselves at their masters with knives, chains, and bare hands. Every street burned. Every district echoed with the cry that had united them all. No more chains. The Dominion responded with brutality. Armored walkers stomped through the streets, firing indiscriminately. War beasts bred for conquest tore through rioters. Elite troops wielding plasma lances cut down dozens with every sweep. But unlike every rebellion before, this one did not falter. Humans had shown them how to fight, and more importantly, how to believe. The turning point. On the command deck of the fortress itself, the High Regent sneered as reports of losses poured in. "Primitive scum," he hissed, his voice echoing across the chamber. "Break them. Burn them. Remind the galaxy who rules it." But as the words left his lips, The fortress shuddered. The Iron Dawn had broken through the orbital ring and was descending through the atmosphere, engines burning white. Brace! Rain shouted as the ship screamed into the sky above the fortress, dodging fire by mere meters. With a final roar, it crashed into the citadel walls, tearing a gaping wound through towers that had stood unchallenged for centuries. From the wreckage, humans poured out alongside Karate and Atari allies. Plasma fire lit the corridors. Drones buzzed overhead, dropping charges into enemy formations. Every hallway was a slaughterhouse. At the forefront strode Reigns, electro whip torn from a Dominion overseer wrapped around his arm like a trophy. His voice carried through the chaos. Today, the slaves become conquerors. The fall of Zeroth. The final battle raged in the throne chamber. The High Regent stood cloaked in shimmering armor, wielding a spear of pure plasma. Around him, Dominion elites formed a wall of steel. But the tide had already turned. Humans fought with reckless fury. Karate smashed through shields, Atari darted through cracks in defenses, and Valen drones detonated in brilliant bursts of fire. One by one, the Regent's guards fell. Rain stepped forward, bloody but unbroken. The Regent leveled his spear, snarling, "You are nothing. Your species is dust. You will kneel like all the rest." Rains tightened his grip on the whip. His voice was steady. "We were the last to kneel, and the first to rise." The Regent lunged. The battle was savage, brutal, short. The Regent fought with the strength of 1,000 years of rule, but Reigns fought with the strength of every chain ever broken. When it was done, the Regent lay on the throne room floor, his armor shattered, his voice silenced. And with his fall, the Dominion began to collapse. The dawn of a new age. The fortress world of Zeroth Prime burned. Its fleets were scattered, its throne broken, its chains shattered. Across the galaxy, news spread faster than light. The Dominion, eternal, unshakable, immortal, had fallen. Worlds erupted in celebration. Slaves cast off their collars. Races that had lived in silence for centuries screamed their freedom into the stars. And at the heart of every celebration, the same truth was spoken. Humanity had led the way. We had been the last enslaved, the newest captives, the least expected to endure. And yet it was we who had taught the galaxy to rise, not just as rebels, not just as survivors, but as conquerors of the very empire that had once claimed to own them. As the sun rose over the shattered skyline of Zeroth, Rain stood amidst the ruins. Around him, humans and aliens alike raised banners of freedom. Scraps of cloth, painted with symbols of hope. The war was not yet over. Remnants of the Dominion still lingered. Fleets still prowled. Governors still clung to power. But the heart of the empire had fallen, and with it, the certainty of its rule. For the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was free to dream. And humanity, once slaves, now stood not at the bottom of history, but at its vanguard, the conquerors of conquerors, the fire that refused to die, the species that had taught the stars what it meant to rise.